Sometimes, folks, good things come to those who wait. I have 3 days hands-on with this camera, and my honest first impressions are it's a quantum leap forward for Nikon and their mirrorless range. It's phenomenal. The AF and the accuracy is on point. The battery life is unbelievable. Build quality, absolutely rock solid. And the speed is frightening, shocking. Kids, lock up your hard drives. This thing is dangerous. At 45.7 megapixels with this speed, you're going to need to upgrade everything. In fact, over these next couple of days, I'm going to see just how many shots I can rack up to stress test this guy and see what it's really capable of. Now, I'm going to assume you've seen most of the top line specs. You're probably watching 10 of these videos today, but a few things that I think are worth drawing out. 3D tracking for autofocus is back. It also will do full sensor readout, 20 frames per second in RAW, 30 and up to 120 frames in JPEG. It has no mechanical shutter. We're going to talk about that a lot in a little bit. And it also has really impressive video specs. This is going to be a photography-centered video, though. I will have a video-focused one. I'll put a link to that below. But this is a flagship camera, and to be honest, one that we've been waiting a long time for. So how it performs in the hand, out in the field, to me is far more important than what the marketing spec sheet says that it's able to do. All of the focus points, all of the tracking, all of the technology mean nothing if it's not implemented well, if it's not ergonomic, if it doesn't perform when you want it to perform. So in this video, I'm going to shoot as much as I possibly can, do as many different tests as I can, and try and cram it all into this video so I can share with you my honest first opinions rather than just regurgitating the specifications, and let you know if I think this is worthy as the new king of the Nikon family. Now, just one quick thing. Okay, I've got my pre-order in, so I won't be left on the waiting list. Now let's go test this guy out. Quick shout out to my friend Kathy. Thank you so much for introducing me to the guys at Pro Media Gear. They're based in Chicago, USA. They design and manufacture there, and you'll note me shooting with their Katana Junior gimbal a lot today. It's awesome. So good to be able to have full range of movement, but then to be able to easily lock it down, even with really big kits. This guy, because of its cool design with all of the cutouts, it only weighs 2.4 pounds, but it is weight rated to take a kit of 150 pounds, way heavier than anything that I'm ever shooting with. So if you're shooting with long lenses or big camera setups, do yourself a favor and check out their gimbal heads. They're great quality. The guys are really nice as well, and they're sponsors of this video. Now, it's important to note, shooting these dancers in studio, it may look bright, but it was actually quite low light. A lot of what I was shooting here was at ISO 6400. I also shot in a variety of different lighting situations, such as backlit, incredibly contrasty scenes, and shots where the eye was in really hard shadow. And without fail, the Z9 pulled the eye out incredibly fast. I was genuinely surprised. Let's compare the Z7 II to the Z9 and how quickly it picks up the face or eye as dancer Nikki walks towards camera. First here with the Z7 II, you'll see it sees that there's something in the frame, but it doesn't actually notice her until the very, very end when we get the eye recognition. In total, it took 24 photos on that walk, and only the last 6 were really identifying her and sharp. The Z9, on the other hand, grabbed her eye from the other side of the room instantly. As soon as I turned the camera on, boom, it knew she was there. It took 166 images, and every single one of them is in focus. Next, I had her do a tumble routine. Same story here, the Z7 II got off 31 images, and for the most part, it actually stayed focused on the rear curtain. You'll see right around here, there's a shift in the bokeh on the curtain. That's where it finally noticed her, and we just got the final few properly in focus. The Z9, however, fired off an insane 200 images, almost 7 times as many, and almost all of them were in perfect focus. Now, before we look at some even more challenging lighting tests, please take a moment to check out my brand new dramatic single light portraiture course over at learn.mattgranger.com. This is a comprehensive 6-hour course filmed in 4K with 7 different models over 18 months in a variety of different lighting challenges. The program is designed to help you create nuanced, interesting, and complex portraits using just one light. You can check that out at the link in the description below. Back to the dance studio, and I wanted to test the autofocus for its precision. So next I went to the 50mm f1.2 and shot dancer Jana as she span around the pole with her gown, her hair, and the pole itself often blocking her face. Let's see how it does. Looking at hundreds of images of these twirls, there is the occasional one that's out of focus, and that's generally the very first shot in a sequence where it hadn't quite locked on. It's literally 1 or 2 frames, but then once it is locked on, even at f1.2, it stays with her and is nailing focus almost every single time. Okay folks, let's quickly talk about the 120 frames per second JPEG, who it's for, is it useful, do you actually get 120 frames? Taking a look at these shots of dancer Jana, I actually shot for several seconds to test it out. But let's take a quick look here. I want to first see how big is the file size. So, going into our folder here, you can see it's they're around 2.9 to 3.4 megabyte, roughly. They're 11 megapixel. It is a 4128 by 2752 file, which is about 100 pixels less on each side than like a Nikon D3S. So in the ballpark of what sports photographers were shooting with like a decade ago, nowhere near the high res that this camera is capable, and no, not capable of doing this in RAW. But the value of this, I think, is, and why I think it's so great that it is not a DX crop, it's full frame sensor, is if you're lining up a shot and you've got it working and you think, I want this in as slow motion as possible to capture the peak action, you switch to that mode and you don't then have to reframe or change your lens or change your distance, you keep the frame. And just taking a look at a motion like this, let's say I'm trying to capture absolute peak motion, so there where her feet are fully extended, it's these shots. So we've probably got 2 or 3 shots where she's fully extended. If I was shooting at 10 or 20 frames a second, I'd be getting a 1/12 or a 1/6 of as many images. So the chance of getting one at perfect extension is quite low. Here I have the options. Now let's take a look at how many shots we're actually getting off. Taking a look at this file down here on the right, you can see this was taken at 12:16:31, and the next file is at 12:16:32. So that's the start of the second. Then I went through and found what was the last shot in that second, and it is this one. So here we are again, it is at 32 seconds, and then the next file is 33. So if we take the 32 back to the 32, surprise, surprise, we get exactly 120 images. And it's not really surprising, this camera does 4K 120. These files are bigger than 4K, but in the ballpark. So here as we play it through, you can see we're just getting so many options here, and even with the hair going over her face, yes, it's all in perfect focus here, shooting with the 50mm 1.2, and so good to have a dancer who can just keep doing these routines again and again. And I can tell you in this full burst, I actually took more like 400 or 500 shots, and they're all in focus, even as her back turns to the camera. Now, there is a lot more to a good camera than just having great autofocus, but it is something that a lot of people are focused on in 2021, and at this price point you should be able to expect the best, and I can say I'm blown away and really pleasantly surprised. Now, you could fairly say that Nikon is late to the party and it's really just catching up to the competitors in this regard. I would look at it another way. They are late to the party, but they're now adding all of this performance to a system that already has spectacular lenses and decades worth of experience getting the user experience, ergonomics, and menus to be in a place that are just so nice to use. Something that other camera systems that have had focus like this for a while still haven't managed to achieve. So absolutely, it's fair to say that Nikon were late to the party, but given the choice of either coming out first with something as a flagship that was subpar, or waiting, taking a bit longer and coming out with something that really performs, I personally think they've taken the right route. And if this is able to perform with adapted glass really well, then suddenly it's going to unlock this beast of a body to what I think is arguably one of the best lens systems ever, which is the F Mount range of lenses. Okay folks, so we're now halfway through the day. So far it's been going great. Has, however, for the majority been in indoor situations at higher ISO, which means we've probably put the autofocus and everything through its toughest challenges already. But I want to get some shots here outdoors with all of the sunlight to work with, so we have super fast shutter speeds, base ISOs, and there's one other test, if you've been following me for a while, that you will know I care about immensely and I really want to see this camera do well on, and that is how does it work when adapted for the 200 f2. So I actually have a D6 downstairs as well, so we'll do a little comparison, native and adapted. This is the FTZII Mark II, which apparently is the same. It's just a little bit smaller, but apparently the performance should be just the same. So got this again on the gimbal head, so we can get, it makes it so easy. You can literally adjust the camera with a finger, put it wherever you want, lock, unlock, rotate, and just shoot away knowing that everything is locked down and ready to go. There goes another 50 photos. So Mel, you feel like getting a sunburn? So, I mean, it seems to be performing perfectly, maybe the best that it's ever worked, having shot with it on pretty much all the cameras, including D850 and D5 that I owned. I've actually never put it on a D6 because I haven't shot with that. I'm going to just do one back to back now, D6 and Z9, and have her walk at me the same way and see how many shots we get off, and wide open, how many are in tack sharp focus. Even at that walking speed at f2, if it's not keeping up well, you have such a small depth of field, we're really gonna see it. D6, no need for the FTZ. Let's see how it does. Now the D6 in 3D tracking identified and stayed with her face the whole time, but you'll notice some of the files, it actually focused on the nose or the forehead or the chest, and with the focus points being limited to a smaller central area, I can't track her face as close to the camera. In total, it fired off 109 shots, and I would say 80 to 90% of them are acceptably sharp in focus. The Z9 fired off 245 frames, more than twice as many as the D6, and wide open at f2.0, every single shot is sharp, right on the eye. Even as she gets really close to the frame and she's up in the top corner, it stays with her. I'm genuinely blown away. I can honestly say I think this lens is performing better adapted to the Z9 than it has on any native F-mount camera that I've ever used it on. A round of applause for Mel in her 9-inch ridiculous heels, everyone. Thank you. Neighboring buildings, you're welcome. Okay, so a lot of the improvements we're seeing on this camera come down to, in large part, thanks to the processor. This new guy is using the Expeed 7 processor that Nikon says is 10 times faster than the Expeed 6. But given the latest generation, Z6 and Z7 Mark IIs had dual processors, I guess we can say this is 5 times more processing power than them. But overall, how quickly your camera can get focus, do metering, do all the calculations it needs, fire off all of the shots previously, move the mechanical shutter, and then do the image processing, send that to the card and write it. How fast it can do all of that, how many frames per second it can do, is ultimately only as fast as the weakest part or the slowest part in that whole chain. And it seems with this camera, that's coming down to the cards that you choose, which is kind of funny because this is using CF Express Type B, which are already the fastest media option on the market. So when you're choosing a card, don't just look at the numbers that are written on the card because that's the theoretical maximums. What you really want to concern yourself with is what's the guaranteed minimum write speed. That's what you need to keep your buffer cleared. And the degree of variation may really surprise you. Here, shooting on high efficiency RAW using the fastest pro grade media cards, this is sped up 20 times. I was able to fire off an insane 1,860 images before the buffer started to choke. However, using the even more expensive Sony cards, the same test, I only got 550. So you remember at the start I said I was going to see how many images I could take with this guy? Well, I think I may have set some kind of a world record. Just at the day shooting at the studio, I fired off, you want to guess? Leave a comment. 23,500 images, plus a bit of change. Insane, mind-blowing, and ridiculous. I definitely could have done the job with 5% that many frames, but I really was trying to stress test the cameras and see how many I was able to get off. Now, I have to also note, not having the tactile rumble of the shutter in the camera, especially if you're in silent mode, it's really easy to lose track of how many shots you've taken. You do a 5-second burst of a dancer doing a movement, and depending on the mode you're in, that could be literally 100 or 600 images written to your card. And the craziest part, despite having taken 24,000 images that day, I also took about 6 minutes of 4K 120, 4 minutes of 8K video, and I still had over 30% battery remaining. Really hard to believe, but the numbers don't lie. Hey folks, just jumping here in edit to clear up a couple of things because I realize this is becoming kind of a monster video. First, please note that I don't call this a review. This is a first hands-on. Because it was a pre-production camera, I had a Nikon rep with me whilst I was shooting for the full day at the studio. I also had a half-day briefing and another half-day hands-on to get extra footage and to test out some of the different features. But because I was using a pre-production camera for a limited amount of time and I still don't have access to the raw files, this isn't any kind of an exhaustive test. I will do that as soon as possible. Okay, so the fact that we are this far into the video and I'm only just talking to you about something that's quite outstanding on this camera shows you how much that there is to be excited about. This is the first traditional mirrorless camera without a mechanical shutter, which means that when you're firing away at your 20 or 30 frames a second, nothing is physically moving inside the camera. Now, Nikon say that this is because the sensor speed readout on this is the fastest of anything on the market, which allows for it requires completely silent shooting, and also what facilitates what they say is zero rolling shutter in video. Check out my separate video on the video for that. Now, as a flash shooter, I was really interested, what does that mean for us? If this is reading out really, really quickly, then, if we're shooting with manual flash, theoretically, we should be able to sync at whatever speed it's reading out at, right? Now, we know it's not a global shutter, but what is that going to mean? So I actually ran the test and did all of the different variables to see, and it turns out it's actually exactly the same as like a D850 or a D6. 1/250th of a second, it will sync reliably with, flash. Or if you go into autofocal plane, high-speed sync flash, you can go to 1/320th or all the way through to 1/8000th, whatever the flash will allow you to use. So essentially the readout speed is somewhere in the ballpark of 1/250th, 1/320th, somewhere in there. Now, as I mentioned, being that it has no shutter, that means there's no shutter noise. So it is a silent camera. You can, however, turn on sound. It has 2 different pitches and 3 different volumes. And there's 3 different visualizations. One that will put some bars on the sides, one that puts them on all of the sides, and then one that actually makes it look like it has blackout, like a non-stacked CMOS sensor, which kind of defeats the purpose. I think I'll go with one of the bars options. Now, if you're a Nikon shooter like I am for over a decade, you just get used to the layout of things. Or I guess if you're with any brand for that long. The buttons have moved around slightly here and there, and now if you're going to have a tandem of a Z7 Mark II and a Z9, yes, some of the buttons are in different places, so that's going to be a little bit of an adjustment. But if you have shot with D4, D5, D6s, this is so familiar, so rugged. I feel like it's a little bit smaller and lighter, and it just fits my hand better than the Z6 and Z7. Easily the most ergonomic mirrorless camera I've ever used, but having said that, my hand has pretty much grown to the shape of a Nikon grip from having used them for so long. Now, in terms of handling and build quality more generally, as someone who has been shooting Nikon for decades, who's been fortunate to shoot with pretty much all of the different cameras from all the manufacturers, I can honestly say I think this has build quality as high as anything I've ever used. Certainly as high as any Nikon digital camera that I can recall. I would have no hesitations taking this out in the field. It feels incredibly robust. All of the buttons and dials are crisp, responsive, and well built. And whilst I know some people will have hesitations about the articulating rear screen, it does feel as well built as any that I've seen on other cameras, and I personally love it. Okay folks, time sure flies when you're playing with new tech. Let's wrap up for now. I'll get this in again to test out more as soon as I can. As a Nikon user, I have to say I'm thrilled. This is everything that I had hoped that it would be. And I have already ordered one for myself. Now, nothing is perfect, but what it is as a piece of technology and what it means for the evolution of camera technology, I'm excited about. And what it's going to mean for Nikon as a company is also great. And for other Nikon users, the enjoyment they're going to get shooting with this, I'm really happy to see as well. Nikon have built out a really exceptional range of Z mount lenses. Yes, it still has more to bring out, but the quality of the ones that are out there are just fantastic. And if the performance of this guy with the 200 f2 is anything to go off, being able to unlock all of those F mount lenses to use on this in near native performance is going to really change things up because they have such great lenses out there as well. So generally, I'm just glad to see Nikon back up there at the very pinnacle of the camera industry, duking it out with the top players in the field. And, you know, like they were for the D3, D4, D5, D6, right up there on every metric, not just what's on paper, but how it actually performs in the field. It's great to see. So that's how I feel as a user. As a reviewer, being impartial, I have to say the rear screen and the EVF just aren't at the same resolution of the ones that they're competing with. Also, the raw FPS performance isn't class leading either. In terms of the EVF and screen, it just is what it is. I have to say, in the field, I didn't really notice it. You know, going in, showing the dancers the photos, at no point did I think this wasn't detailed or high quality enough. But when you do have a really, really high quality EVF on your eye, you do notice it. So that is what it is. That's not something that can be updated later. The brightness of the EVF is great, however. Being able to shoot on the rooftop there with Mel with the sun directly in my eyes, I still had no problem at all being able to see the images. In terms of the FPS, again, that just is what it is, for now at least. The A1 is high res, doing 30 frames a second compared to 20 in RAW for this guy. And the R3 is also doing 30, but in a much lower resolution. So if you need around 50 megapixel and 30 frames, this isn't the camera for you. However, I have a hunch, and it's just a feeling, I have nothing to back it up, but I reckon we may see 30 frames come soon. The reason I say that, there's a couple of reasons. One, I feel like the pipeline is there. They're already using cards that are twice as fast as what the Sony A1 uses. The processor is capable of doing 8K as well as ProRes RAW. So it's up there in terms of all of the metrics that you would need to do the 30 frames RAW. And there's a track record of this. When the D5 came out, it was only doing 3 minutes, I think it was, of 4K video in one clip. And then a month or two later with firmware, they bumped it up to the half an hour. So there is a precedent, and I just have a hunch that we may see that happen here, maybe even with extended video options as well, but we'll have to wait and see. Hey folks, just jumping in one last time here in edit. I filmed that several days ago before the rumor sites went crazy with the leak from Nikon India about video. And it's just been confirmed to me now, like 8 hours before the official announcement of the camera, that 8K 60 will be coming via a firmware update. So I was right on my hunch in that regard. So let's see and watch this space about the raw frames per second, if that's going to update in the future as well. Now, a couple of things I have to note that I haven't even tested at all. That's the weather sealing, the bird, animal, and automobile autofocus modes, as well as the dynamic range at all, and really the ISO, because whilst I've been capturing RAW throughout with the JPEG, I'm only able to open, as of right now, the JPEG, so I can't comment on that stuff. Now, for any camera, especially a flagship, I really want to do a review out in the field. I call them field tested. You can see the playlist. It's only when you're out for weeks, maybe months, in the field, really putting it through its paces, where you're shooting at midnight, at sunrise, in the rain, in the mud, in the bright temperatures, you know, hot and cold, in different lighting conditions. That's where you're going to find quirks and bugs and things that don't work right, or situations where there's banding or things that come from not having a mechanical shutter that you just won't find even from 2 months being in a studio situation. You've got to be out there in the field. So I will be trying to get this in to do a more detailed test as soon as I can. So please leave me a comment below what you would like to see tested in that one. Now, 2 last things. First, please do check out the Dramatic Single Light course. I think you're going to really love it. Over 6 hours showing you all the different variables of light and how you can create really great images using just one light. And the last thing, and I mean this sincerely, I'm not trolling, I hope anyone who got tired of waiting for Nikon to finally bring out a flagship and decided they needed to move on to another system, I sincerely hope that you're loving your photography, you're getting the results that you want, that the system gives you everything you need. I know for myself, I would be kicking myself a little if I had just moved and then this came out, because it's so good and it retains all of those things that I like about Nikon whilst bringing in the latest tech. But at the end of the day, the brand of the camera in your hand means nothing. It's about what you do with it, and equally, how much enjoyment you get from actually shooting. And I can't wait to be the owner of one of these guys and be putting it through its paces. But just note, if I do find issues, problems down the road, I'll be open and upfront with you about them so that you know I'm not a fanboy who's blind and only going to focus on the good things. But so far, there's a lot of good things in this. I hope you found this useful. Make sure you've liked and subscribed. I'll see you soon.